I was just leaving my son's house that evening, the taste of dinner still lingering faintly on my tongue, when my phone buzzed against the leather seat beside me. An unknown number. I shouldn't have cared. I get enough spam messages to ignore most without blinking, but something about the timing made me glance down. The screen glowed with four words that turned my blood cold. Don't forget to look around. For a heartbeat, the world froze. The quiet hum of the car engine, the rhythm of the streetlights passing overhead, it all slipped away under the weight of those words. My fingers hovered above the screen, stiff and uncertain, before I managed to type a shaky reply. Is this a threat? The answer came faster than I expected, sharp and almost mocking. This is salvation. I sat there, staring at those two sentences, my chest tightening as though an invisible rope was being pulled tighter and tighter around my ribs. Salvation? From who? From what? Before I could make sense of it, the night itself broke apart. 3 sharp knocks crashed against my front door, each one like a gunshot splitting the calm. Not polite knocks, not uncertain ones. They were desperate, angry, filled with a demand that made the air vibrate. Bang, bang, bang. Open up. I know you're in there. I froze in the hallway, recognizing the voice instantly. Jasper, my son. But his tone wasn't the Jasper I knew. It was pitched higher, cracked at the edges, riding on some manic wave I couldn't yet see. I set down the coffee cup I'd been carrying, the porcelain clinking against its saucer with a force that betrayed the steadiness I was trying to project. My glasses slid halfway down my nose as I walked toward the door, every step weighted with the sense that whatever waited on the other side would change everything. The brass handle felt cold under my palm. I turned it, slow, deliberate, yet before the latch fully clicked, Jasper shoved the door open, barging inside as though chased by devils. His appearance hit me like a slap. Wrinkled clothes, damp with sweat despite the crisp May air, his hair a mess, his trembling hands clawing through it in nervous repetition. His eyes, my God, his eyes, darted around the living room with the wild panic of a trapped animal, as though escape routes were already being measured and memorized. Dad, I need $150,000, urgently. The words spilled from him in a breathless rush, nearly tripping over themselves. This is life and death, life and death. I closed the door behind him, deliberately, almost ceremonially, as though sealing us into a room that suddenly felt smaller. My arms folded across my chest, the weight of years of disappointment pressing down on me. Jasper, my son, 38 years old, and yet here he was again, frantic, desperate, rehearsing a line I'd heard far too many times before. Life and death, I repeated quietly, though inside my stomach had already knotted into iron. You don't understand, he snapped, spinning on his heel, pacing like a predator caught in its own cage, his breathing ragged, his movements jerky and uncoordinated, his every step dripping with an energy I'd learned long ago not to trust. But this time, I told myself, something was different, something darker. Jasper spun around, his face flushed with panic and something darker, anger. His chest rose and fell in shallow bursts, his hands twitching like they needed to strike something, anything. These people don't joke around, he said, his voice low, as if speaking their names too loudly might summon them into the room. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked on with cruel indifference, each second carving the silence into sharper pieces. I sat still, studying him the way a surgeon studies an open wound, methodically, without blinking. The dark circles beneath his eyes looked painted in ash, his jaw clenching and unclenching with the rhythm of someone trying to keep control but failing miserably. This wasn't just another gambling debt. I'd seen enough of those to recognize the script. No, this time the stakes were bloodier, the danger closer, the shadow looming larger, and I'm not joking either, I finally said, keeping my voice level, calm, though my heart hammered like a drum in my ribs. Enough. Time to get your head straight. Jasper's response came like a gunshot. His fist slammed down onto the oak dining table with a crack that reverberated through the house. That table had survived 3 generations of our family. Birthdays, arguments, Christmas dinners, years of scars from careless elbows and spilled wine, and yet it absorbed Jasper's fury without flinching. My son, however, was not so fortunate. His knuckles came away red, and he hissed, cradling his hand, his teeth bared like an animal in pain. "You have no idea what you're doing," he spat, his voice taut, shaking. "These aren't the type of people who accept late payments." I moved slowly, deliberately, to my armchair, the worn leather one that had molded to my frame over the years, a throne of memory and habit. I sank into it, letting the creak of the old chair fill the room. From there, I had a perfect view of Jasper as he resumed pacing, his footsteps scuffing against the hardwood in an irregular, manic rhythm. "Tell me about these people," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He froze mid-step, his back turned to me, shoulders tight. For a moment, the only sounds were the relentless tick of the clock and his ragged, shallow breaths. Then, slowly, he turned. Something had shifted in his face. The panic still clung to him, but underneath it was steel, cold, calculating, dangerous. "Tony Castellano," he said, finally, his voice dropping to a whisper, as if the walls themselves might be listening. "And his associate. They run operations throughout the South Side. I borrowed money to cover other debts." I finished the thought for him, sighing as if the weight of it came from my bones themselves. "And now you've dug yourself deeper than ever before." His lips parted, but no defense came. My words had already judged him. "Jasper," I said, shaking my head slowly, "I've been pulling you out of holes for 20 years. Every single time, you swore it was the last. Every single time, I believed you." He came closer then, almost crumbling, dropping to one knee beside my chair. For a fleeting moment, the ghost of my little boy flickered in his posture, the same boy who used to crawl into my lap after nightmares, whispering that he was scared of the dark, clinging to me for comfort. But the illusion shattered as quickly as it appeared. His eyes, the ones staring up at me now, carried no innocence, only desperation, and beneath that, a predator's glint of manipulation. "This time is different, Dad," he whispered hoarsely. "They gave me until tomorrow night. If I don't pay." His throat bobbed, the Adam's apple jerking with the weight of the words. "They showed me photos. What happens to people who don't pay?" His words hung heavy, seeping into the room like smoke. Even the air seemed thicker, harder to breathe. $150,000, I repeated slowly, each syllable deliberate, weighing him down. "Where exactly did this money go, Jasper?" His eyes flicked away from mine, locking on a meaningless spot over my shoulder, refusing to meet the truth head-on. "Poker," he muttered. "High-stakes games, basement clubs. I was winning, Dad. I swear I was winning. For weeks, I was so close to clearing it all, and then you lost it all." I finished for him. The pattern was too familiar, etched into my memory, as clearly as the grooves in the table he'd just struck, predictable as sunrise. His fists clenched at his sides, the tendons pulling tight. "You don't understand what it's like," he snapped, his voice climbing, brittle with rage. "The pressure, the calculations, the rush when the cards fall your way. I'm good at this, Dad. I just need one more chance. One." "No." The word cut the air like a blade, sharper, harder, more final than I intended, but necessary. In that instant, Jasper's face changed. The mask of desperation fell away, replaced by something uglier, something I'd long feared was hiding beneath. His eyes narrowed into slits, his lips curled back just slightly, and when he spoke, his voice carried a venom I had never heard from my son before, and in that moment, I knew. This wasn't about debt. This wasn't about money. This was about control. "You've always been selfish," Jasper spat, his voice vibrating with venom. "All your love went to that company." I stayed seated in my armchair, unmoving, as if rooted into the leather itself. Across from me stood a stranger, a man who wore my son's face but none of his soul. The grandfather clock continued its unbroken rhythm in the corner, steady and detached, as though mocking us with its indifference to the storm that now raged in my living room. "I worked," I said quietly, letting each word land with the weight of years for you, for your future. "For my future," Jasper snapped, his laugh sharp and bitter, cutting like glass. He resumed his pacing, only this time his movements carried more force, his arms slicing the air as though every gesture was an accusation hurled in my direction. His body was a storm, circling, destroying, and I was the calm at its eye. You don't even know when my birthday is, he barked suddenly, wheeling on me with wild eyes. October 15th, I answered without hesitation. The words rolled off my tongue like a fact carved into stone. Then softer but sharper, I added. And I remember every gift you broke, every one you pawned, every promise you shattered. He froze mid-stride. For the briefest flicker, shame crossed his features, a ghost of the boy he once was. But it vanished as quickly as it came, devoured by the flames of his anger. That's right, he snarled. Throw it back in my face. Every mistake, every failure. You've been keeping score all along, haven't you? A little ledger in your head of every time I messed up. I didn't rise. I didn't even lean forward. I watched him rage like a hurricane crashing into furniture, the coffee table skidding slightly, my evening paper drifting to the floor in silence. The lamp trembled as he passed too close, the shade quivering on its brass frame. He was chaos incarnate, tearing through a room that had always been my sanctuary. I keep a ledger of love, I said evenly, my voice carrying steady through the storm. Every time I picked you up from the police station, every debt I covered, every second chance I gave you. That ledger is written in sacrifice, Jasper. Love, he spun toward me, his face twisted, his eyes blazing with madness. You call control love. You call manipulation love. That's what you've done to me my entire life. Controlled me, manipulated me, called it love. The irony of his accusation was almost unbearable. Here was my son, who had just tried to manipulate me with sob stories, threats, and the shadow of criminals at his back, accusing me of the very crime he had perfected. The leather of my chair creaked as I shifted slightly, adjusting, as though bracing myself for what was coming. My voice remained calm. Jasper, sit down. Let's talk about this rationally. Calm? His voice cracked, breaking into a ragged shout. There's nothing calm about having a target on your back. Nothing calm about knowing that tomorrow night, if I don't have their money, they'll... He stopped, dead in his tracks, his hands dragged through his hair, trembling, pulling, almost clawing at his own scalp. The words choked off in his throat, as if even speaking them aloud might summon the nightmare he feared. And in the silence that followed, I finally understood. He wasn't just terrified of Tony Castellano and his men. He was terrified of me. I retreated to the quiet sanctuary of my study, a room cluttered with family photographs and small mementos, each one a testament to 40 years of honest work, careful planning, and measured success. The walls themselves seemed to hold the weight of decades, celebrations, disappointments, and the invisible labor that had built the security my family now took for granted. I set the broken frame gently on my desk, the glass catching the lamplight like fractured time, and poured 2 fingers of whiskey from the crystal decanter Mabel had given me for our 20th anniversary. The amber liquid swirled, catching the light, and I found myself staring into its depths as if it could offer answers I hadn't yet allowed myself to face. The wingback chair by the small fireplace welcomed me with the familiar embrace of old wood and worn leather. From here I could see everything that mattered. The photo albums on the lower shelf, the filing cabinet that held the documents that safeguarded our life, the desk where I had made decisions that ensured stability and order. Mabel's voice echoed in my mind. Always practical, always prescient, urban. You're too soft with the boy. I spoke to the cracked photograph of her, her fractured smile somehow radiant, luminous even in its imperfection. If she were alive, she would have stopped this madness long before it reached this point. I opened the family album, letting the pages whisper beneath my fingers as I traced the past. Jasper at 6, gap-toothed, grinning beside his first bicycle. 12, sullen and withdrawn, uniform muddy and temper flaring after quitting mid-season. 16, proud beside the car I'd bought him, which he had totaled 3 months later, racing his friends down the cul-de-sac. Each image was a story, a monument to potential squandered, to chances given and wasted. But the albums only told part of the truth. Behind the curated memories, I had always known there were darker, more damning truths. I pulled out the manila folder, labeled Jasper Financial Records, and spread its contents across the coffee table: bank statements, receipts, check stubs, the paper trail of 20 years of enablement. My hands moved automatically, calculating, tallying, the calculator clicking with a rhythm that sounded like judgment itself. Car payments, insurance claims, legal fees, gambling debts. The numbers climbed steadily: 20,000, 50,000, 85,000, 137,000, 462,000. The figures stared back at me, written neatly in my own hand: enough to buy a house, enough to fund a small business, enough to secure a comfortable retirement for someone who had worked honestly their entire life. I sipped the whiskey, feeling its burn trace a line of fire down my throat, grounding me in a clarity that bordered on cold calculation. Outside, the neighborhood settled into the gentle lull of evening. Somewhere, a television laughed through open windows, oblivious to the storm inside my walls. Normal families, living normal lives, unaware that across the street, a father was calculating the exact cost of his own son's destruction. My eyes lingered on the wedding photograph with Mabel. We were young then, brimming with dreams and plans. She had been practical, wise in ways I only fully appreciated years later. Even then, she had worried about spoiling any children we might have. Children need boundaries, she would say during our late-night talks about starting a family. Love without limits isn't love. It's harm disguised as affection. I had thought her overly cautious then. Now, sitting amid the evidence of my failures as a father, her words felt prophetic. The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced across the room like ghosts of my past. I thought of my own father, a stern man who taught me the value of hard work through example rather than handouts. When I had wanted a bicycle, I earned it after school, laboring in his shop. When I crashed his truck at 17, I repaired it with my own savings. You made a man of me, Dad, I whispered to the flames. What did I make of my son? The answer stared back at me from the broken photograph on my desk, from the folder of receipts, from the memory of Jasper's cold, calculating smile, the same one that had haunted me since that night he had barged into my home, demanding money with desperation masquerading as innocence. And as I leaned back, letting the whiskey settle in my chest, I realized this was no longer just about mistakes or debts. This was about reckoning. He had threatened me in my own home. The thought alone made my chest tighten. I closed the financial records with deliberate finality, each paper sliding into place with a whisper, like the faint click of judgment. The family album followed, its weight substantial in my hands. These memories would remain, but the cycle they documented would end here. The grandfather clock in the living room struck 10, each chime echoing through the quiet house, heavy and deliberate. Outside, the last of the evening joggers had passed, leaving only the rustle of leaves in the oak trees, the night settling with deceptive calm. I finished the whiskey, savoring its burn, then locked the manila folder in my desk drawer. The key turned with a satisfying click, and in that sound I felt something settle: resolve, finality, a boundary drawn in stone. Whatever threats Jasper might make, whatever desperation he could conjure, I would not bend. He was 38 years old. If he was going to learn responsibility, it would be in the hardest way possible. The broken photograph caught the dying light of the fire one last time, casting jagged shadows across the desk before I turned off the lamp and headed upstairs to bed. Even there, the images of chaos lingered: the shards of glass, the echo of anger, the wild, cold smile of my son. 18 hours later, I arrived at Wells Tech Solutions at 9 sharp, trying to immerse myself in routine, profit margins, market analyses, the precise patterns of commerce that normally quieted my mind. From my corner office, the view usually brought calm: Lake Michigan stretching endlessly to the horizon, the geometric perfection of downtown Chicago's skyline, but today it felt like prison bars, each building a reminder of structure and control, contrasting violently with the upheaval in my own home. I adjusted the family photograph on my desk, the one still intact, showing Mabel and Jasper at Navy Pier, their faces bright with unguarded joy. The contrast with last night's destruction made my chest tighten, as though someone had pressed a fist against it. "Mr. Wells, your son Jasper is online too." My secretary's voice crackled through the intercom, slicing through my brooding. The words hung in the air like smoke. I stared at the blinking red light on my phone, my hand frozen halfway to the receiver. 15 seconds passed. 20. The light continued its patient pulse, waiting for me to decide. Finally, I set down my pen, straightened in my leather chair, and steeled myself for another confrontation. "Hello, Jasper," I said, voice controlled but wary. "Dad, I want to apologize for yesterday. I was wrong." The voice on the other end was entirely different. Soft, humble, stripped of the venom and desperation that had shaken my house just 24 hours ago. My fingers gripped the phone tighter, instinctively searching for the trap hidden in these unexpected words. "This is unexpected, Jasper." I let the pause linger, measuring him. "Violet reminded me how much you've done for me over the years. I let my fear control me, and I said terrible things." There was a trembling sincerity in his voice, or a masterful imitation of it. I could not tell which. "Will you come to dinner tonight, please?" I found myself reaching for my appointment calendar, almost mechanically writing, "Dinner, Jasper, 7 p.m. The pen felt heavy in my hand, as if each stroke marked not just a plan but a choice. "All right, what time?" I typed back. 7 o'clock. "And Dad?" His voice faltered, genuine or carefully crafted to tug at the last of my defenses. "I'm truly sorry." The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone, trying to parse what had just occurred. My son, the same one who had threatened me with violence in my own home, was now inviting me to dinner, humble, apologetic, even seemingly contrite. I leaned back, watching the afternoon shadows crawl across the financial reports on my desk. They were meaningless now, mere black marks on white paper, while my mind turned over possibilities like a gambler flipping cards in a tense hand. Had Jasper undergone a miraculous transformation overnight, or was this the most sophisticated manipulation he had ever attempted? Below, the streets of Chicago hummed with predictable rhythm, traffic flowing like a river beneath the towering glass and steel. Above it all, my family teetered on the edge of something I could not yet name. I touched the intact family photo again, studying Jasper's young face before gambling, before desperation carved lines of worry into his eyes, before money had become his only language. My business instincts, honed over 4 decades of deals and negotiations, whispered caution, and yet another thought pressed against me. Insistent, unavoidable, I had a choice. The ledger of love I had kept, the sacrifices I had made, the years spent picking him up from the chaos of his own mistakes. Perhaps they were about to meet their reckoning. Screamed warnings echoed in my mind, but beneath the weariness there was something far more dangerous. Hope, the treacherous possibility that my son had finally hit bottom and was ready to climb back up. I glanced at my watch. 5 hours until dinner. 5 hours to decide whether I was walking into reconciliation or into a carefully laid trap. The afternoon stretched ahead like a question mark, the answer unknown, and the drive home through Chicago's evening traffic gave me too much time to think. Radio stations blurred together as I hunted for distraction, finally settling on classical music that matched my contemplative mood. By the time I reached Oak Park, doubt had hardened into certainty. Something about Jasper's sudden transformation was wrong. My bedroom welcomed me with familiar order. Suits hung in the walk-in closet by color. Mabel's photograph smiled from the nightstand, everything in its designated place. I stood before the mirror, adjusting my tie for the 3rd time, watching my own uncertainty reflected in my eyes. The navy blue suit felt appropriate, respectful, understated, not desperate. My wallet contained credit cards, cash, and business cards, each item methodically checked. My phone showed a full charge. noted with the precision of a man who prepared for every contingency. In my study, I paused before the telephone, weighing options. Mabel's voice echoed in my mind. Trust but verify, Urban. Hope for the best but prepare for the worst. I dialed Martin's number. The familiar baritone answered after 2 rings. Urban. Everything all right? If I don't call you by midnight, check Jasper's apartment, I said evenly, my tone flat, professional. 1247 North Winchester, Unit 3B. A pause. You want to tell me what's going on? Probably nothing. Just humor and old man paranoia. You got it. Be careful, Urban. I hung up and made one final circuit of the house, checking locks with unusual care, the security system armed with a soft beep, the housekeeper's note updated with my destination, each action methodical, businesslike, as if preparing for a board meeting rather than dinner with my son. Passing the living room, my eyes caught the cracked family photo from last night. Mabel's face, bisected by spiderweb cracks in the glass, seemed to watch me with concern. I touched the frame gently, whispering, maybe you were right all along. Outside, my car waited like a faithful companion. I chose the Buick instead of the Mercedes, modest transportation for what I hoped would be a humble evening. The keys were cold in my hand as I settled behind the wheel, adjusting mirrors with unnecessary precision. For a moment, I simply sat, engine off, watching the sun set behind the oaks lining our street. Normal families, normal evenings, homework, television, simple conversations over simple meals. When had my life become so complicated that having dinner with my son required strategic planning? I thought of Jasper's voice on the phone, soft, humble, apologetic. Could a man really change in 18 hours? My business instincts said no. My heart whispered, maybe. The engine turned over smoothly, and I backed out of the driveway with deliberate care. Wicker Park was 35 minutes away through evening traffic, 35 minutes to either salvage a relationship or walk into the trap my son had clearly prepared. The converted brownstone on North Winchester looked tired in the fading light, its brick weathered by Chicago winters and years of neglect. I parked across the street, noting the contrast between this neighborhood and my own urban decay creeping through the cracks, young professionals gentrifying block by block, old-timers clinging to familiarity. Jasper met me at the apartment door with an embrace that lasted a beat too long, his grip firm, practiced. Dad, thank you for coming. It means everything. The performance began immediately. His smile was perfect, warm, measured, apologetic without servility. Either my son had genuinely transformed overnight, or he'd spent considerable time rehearsing this version of himself. Violet's been cooking all afternoon, he said, leading me into the small living room, where mismatched furniture attempted harmony. She's so excited to see you. Violet emerged from the kitchen, hands wiped on a dish towel, her smile bright but tight at the edges. Mr. Wells, welcome. I hope you're hungry. The apartment spoke volumes. Carpets that needed replacing, a coffee table scarred by years of use, bills stacked carefully on a corner shelf, financial reality curated with care. Every detail seemed calculated to appear humble, yet competent, casual, yet organized. I sensed the tension beneath the surface, the careful choreography of a son trying to convince his father that all was well. Stacked on the side table were bills with glimpses of red overdue stamps. Yet the apartment was clean, and Violet had made a visible effort to create warmth with plants and family photos. During dinner, Jasper performed his redemption with Academy Award precision. Dad, I've decided to quit gambling forever. I know how much pain I've caused you, and I want to make it right. That's wonderful to hear, son, I replied, watching his face closely, noting how his eyes didn't quite align with his words. What changed your mind? Seeing you yesterday, realizing what I was putting you through? Violet's phone buzzed against the table. She glanced at it quickly, face paling. Excuse me, I need to check this message. Everything all right, Violet? You seem troubled? No, just work, she said, laughing too quickly, too high. Her hands trembled as she set the phone down. 7 messages during dinner for a teacher on a Tuesday evening seemed excessive. Jasper filled the silences with stories of his newfound perspective, polished, unconvincing. He asked about my business, my health, reminisced about family trips with forced nostalgia. Remember when we went fishing at Lake Geneva? He asked, refilling my wine glass. I recalled him sulking in the cabin after 20 minutes, abandoning his rod entirely. But I nodded, playing my part in this strange theater. Violet grew increasingly agitated. Fork dropped twice, water spilled. She jumped at every phone buzz. Whispered conversations carried from the kitchen, too quiet for me to make out. Budget cuts, Jasper explained when I glanced toward the kitchen, jaw tight. I studied their surroundings. Poker chips carelessly left in a drawer, empty wine bottles by the back door, gym cancellation notices, subtle signs of mismanaged priorities. The meal is delicious, I said, truthfully. Violet had prepared herb-crusted chicken with care. You're lucky to have such a thoughtful wife. Yes, she's very supportive, Jasper replied, smile flickering for a moment. When Violet returned from another phone call, her wedding ring caught the light. She twisted it constantly, nervous, anxious. Mr. Wells, she said suddenly, voice tight, what do you do when someone you care about is in real danger? Jasper paused, fork midair. Honey, that's a strange question. The story about the missing businessman, she cut in quickly, but her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second, revealing genuine fear, and an urgent need to communicate something she couldn't say aloud. I finished my wine, setting down the glass deliberately. Thank you both for a lovely evening. I should head home. As I stood, certainty settled like a stone in my chest. Something was very wrong here. Violet knew it. The cool May evening wrapped around me as I descended the steps from Jasper's building. 55 degrees, perfect for my 45-minute walk home. I needed the time to think, to process the strange performance at dinner. Wicker Park streets buzzed with Tuesday night energy, couples leaving craft cocktail bars, young professionals dining al fresco. The contrast with Jasper's cramped apartment and Violet's tension was stark. This was the Chicago Jasper could have thrived in, had he chosen differently. I pulled my jacket tighter and began the familiar route toward Oak Park, cataloging the evening's inconsistencies. Violet's constant phone checking, Jasper's rehearsed redemption stories, the poker chips visible in the kitchen drawer, all pointed to a reality beneath the performance. My instincts, honed over 40 years in business, screamed that something fundamental was amiss. The commercial streets gave way to quieter residential areas. Streetlights cast intermittent yellow pools across dark stretches. I passed a 24-hour diner, a closed bookstore, empty bus benches. At 9:47 p.m., 17 minutes into my walk, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Don't forget to look around you. I read it twice, fingers moving to reply. Is this a threat? This is rescue, came the immediate response. I tried calling back. Automated message number not in service. Years of business taught me to document everything. I screenshot both messages, sliding the phone back into my pocket but keeping it accessible. The next few blocks felt different. Sound amplified. My footsteps, distant traffic, a dog barking. I glanced over my shoulder more frequently. Then I noticed the car, a black sedan, moving slower than traffic, maintaining the same distance behind me for 3 blocks. When I crossed at a light, it followed. When I turned down a side street, its headlights followed like predatory eyes. Heart racing, muscle memory from childhood games suddenly relevant. I quickened my pace. Empty streets stretched ahead, dimly lit. The sedan accelerated as I broke into a fast walk. At 65, my running days were largely behind me, but desperation provided motivation. Behind me, car doors slammed like a judge's gavel. Stop, old man, we just need to talk. The voice carried authority mixed with annoyance, like a teacher reprimanding a truant. But teachers didn't pursue people through dark alleys, and this speaker's tone promised no pleasant conversation. Police, help, I shouted. The streets remained stubbornly empty. Porch lights off, windows dark. Tuesday night in a working-class neighborhood meant early bedtimes. Shut up and get him. A second, Younger voice, aggressive. Heavy footsteps gained ground. I ducked into an alley between two row houses, using parked cars and overflowing garbage cans as obstacles between myself and my pursuers. My chest tightened with each labored breath, the combination of exertion and adrenaline forming a cocktail my doctor had warned me about years ago. But stopping wasn't an option. Anonymous voices had chased me through dark Chicago streets, their tones carrying an unspoken promise of violence. The alley opened onto a more industrial stretch, loading docks and storage buildings, creating a maze of shadows and potential ambush points. I pressed myself against a brick wall, the cold seeping through my jacket as my heart hammered in my chest. Where did that old guy go? He can't have gotten far, one voice muttered. Split up. You check the left, I'll take the right, came the reply, coordinated, professional. Not the clumsy chatter of opportunistic thieves, but men trained to execute a plan. Realization chilled me to the bone. Salvation appeared in the form of a neglected storage building, tucked behind a row of shuttered shops. The door hung slightly ajar, forgotten by the last worker to leave. I dashed across the open space, calling out, "What do you want from me?" though my words vanished into the night before they could reach anyone. Inside, the shed smelled of motor oil, dust, and decades of abandoned projects. Garden tools hung from hooks, paint cans formed small pyramids, and wooden crates offered perfect cover for a man trying to vanish into shadow. I crouched behind the largest stack, fighting to quiet my frantic breathing. Through grimy windows, flashlight beams swept the alley outside. Whoever had sent them had prepared carefully. This wasn't random. Someone knew my routines, anticipated my path home. The shed door creaked as one of the men tested it. I pressed deeper into the shadows, dust motes dancing in the faint beams of light. A sudden urge to sneeze nearly betrayed me. Check in there. Nah, it's locked tight. Old man's probably halfway to Oak Park by now. Their voices receded, but I stayed frozen. Mabel's words echoed in my mind. Patience was my greatest business asset. Tonight it might save my life. Car doors slammed again, engines started, and I counted 15 minutes of silent tension before allowing my breathing to return to something approaching normal. The tightness in my chest lingered, a reminder of age and limitations, but clarity arrived with a cold certainty. This was no random crime. Someone had sent them for me. I crouched behind the crates, heart finally slowing, watching as flashlight beams swept the alley with precise methodical care. Where did that old guy disappear to? The first voice called, frustration laced with professional annoyance. Maybe he's hiding somewhere. It's dark out here, the younger voice replied, uncertain, inexperienced. I shifted slightly, pressing myself into the shadows, elbow brushing a paint can with a soft scraping sound that made me freeze entirely. 30 seconds of silence followed, stretched thin like hours. Jasper won't pay us for nothing. We need to find him. The words hit me like a physical blow. Jasper, my son, the boy I had raised, guided, bailed out and forgiven over decades, had orchestrated this. He had hired men to hunt me through Chicago's dark streets. The dinner, the humble apologies, Violet's visible anxiety, it had all been theater, a carefully staged performance to position me for this moment. Forget it. He's already scared. We'll try again tomorrow, one voice relented. I pressed my hands over my mouth, barely able to remain silent, letting the weight of my son's betrayal settle fully into my bones. Every instinct screamed to confront this impossible reality, to demand an explanation that could somehow justify the unthinkable. A son paying strangers to terrorize his own father. Boss said just to scare him anyway, right? Make him think twice about refusing help to family, the second voice muttered. And in that moment, crouched in the musty darkness of a storage shed, I understood the full scope of the danger, and the depths of Jasper's ambition, manipulation, and ruthlessness. Martin separated them immediately, using standard interrogation protocols to prevent any collusion. Their initial stories were rehearsed, but cracks appeared quickly under pointed questioning. Within minutes, the web of lies began to unravel. Tony and Vince admitted to being hired for a scare job, and when pressed about the client, both hesitated before finally revealing the name they had been given, Jasper Wells. My stomach sank. Every doubt I'd tried to push aside crystallized into bitter reality. My own son had arranged to have me terrorized. I sat in the sterile fluorescent light of District 18, still trembling, watching as officers collected evidence, cell phones, GPS data, and the black sedan itself, impounded for forensic analysis. Martin spoke quietly, leaning toward me. Urban, I've seen plenty of family disputes in my time, but this crosses a line most wouldn't dare. We need to ensure your safety before this escalates further. I nodded, my hands wrapped tightly around the cold metal of the chair arms. I never imagined it would come to this. Dinner, apologies, Violet's trembling, all calculated, every detail orchestrated to make me vulnerable. The anger simmered beneath the surface, a slow burn fueled by betrayal and disbelief. Martin's gaze was steady. You did the right thing coming here. You documented everything, and you called us immediately. That gives us leverage, evidence that can't be easily denied. He paused, studying my face. But you need to be careful. Jasper is clever. He won't stop with a scare job if he thinks it gets results. I allowed the weight of his words to sink in. My son, the boy I'd nursed through fevers, guided through failures, and bailed out more times than I could count, had crossed a line from recklessness to premeditated intimidation. For the first time in decades, fear gripped me, not for strangers or business rivals, but for my own flesh and blood. The suspects were booked, processed, and confined to holding cells. Martin coordinated protective measures for me, including temporary surveillance at my home and a discreet patrol presence along my usual routes. I left the station in the early hours, the first light of Chicago dawn casting long shadows over empty streets. The city seemed indifferent, as if oblivious to the personal catastrophe that had unfolded within its grid. Driving home, I reviewed every interaction from the previous 24 hours. The dinner invitation, Violet's anxious glances, Jasper's polished confessions, and rehearsed remorse, all part of a sophisticated, coldly calculated plan. The betrayal was absolute, and yet, beneath the shock, a darker clarity emerged. If my son could plan and execute this level of manipulation, he was far more dangerous than I'd ever imagined. Back at Oak Park, the house was quiet. Morning sunlight streamed through familiar windows, illuminating every piece of furniture, every photograph, every memory I had tried to protect. I moved methodically through the rooms, checking locks, ensuring that alarms were active, and reviewing emergency contacts. Mabel's voice echoed in my mind, her calm wisdom in contrast to the chaos that now defined my family. Trust, but verify. Prepare for the worst. Hope for the best. As I sat in the wingback chair, the one that had always offered a vantage point of control, I knew one immutable truth. Nothing would ever be the same with Jasper. The boy who had once crawled into my lap for comfort had become a man capable of turning love into a weapon, and now it was my responsibility to respond, not with blind anger, but with the precision, patience, and strategy that had defined my life. Because if my son had learned to manipulate, I would learn to protect, and I would survive. This isn't a crime of passion, Martin said quietly, his voice low but firm. This is premeditated. He planned every step. The money, the timing, your heart condition, everything. Solicitation of assault, with intent to cause death. Conspiracy. You're looking at serious time. If the evidence holds. I leaned back in the police car, the seat hard and unyielding beneath me, and let the words sink in. 15 to 20 years, my son, Jasper. The boy I'd cradled, taught, and supported through every failure. My flesh and blood facing decades behind bars for attempting to orchestrate my death. The notion made my chest tighten, though not with fear. No, this was something darker. A cocktail of sorrow, betrayal, and grim vindication. Minutes later, we drove to Jasper's apartment. My stomach churned as the city passed in a blur, streetlights reflecting off rain-slicked pavement, neon signs winking like distant eyes. Martin parked 2 blocks away, leaving the final approach to law and procedure rather than my own hands. I didn't trust myself to remain calm if I saw him first. Through binoculars, I watched the tactical team move with precision. Uniformed officers spread around the perimeter, plain-clothes detectives, rifles at the ready, fanned out toward entrances. I saw the black Camry, my son's instrument of terror, idling innocuously by the curb, every second stretched with unbearable tension. Then the moment arrived. Martin's voice came quietly over the radio. Target inside. Move in. The front door opened, and Jasper stepped into the small foyer, oblivious to the web closing around him. My heart beat audibly in my ears. I recognized that posture, the relaxed, rehearsed composure of someone convinced of their own invincibility. He smiled briefly, scanning the street for something he didn't expect. Law enforcement waiting for him. Shouts rang out, officers identifying themselves as police, commands given with authority. Jasper's eyes widened, the practiced mask slipping for the briefest of seconds before he tried to regain control. He attempted to flee, but trained officers intercepted him quickly, hands cuffing him behind his back. I wanted to step forward, to speak, to understand, to scream at him for what he'd done, but Martin held me back. "You'll see him soon," he said. "Right now, let the process work. We have enough evidence to ensure he can't manipulate or intimidate anyone else. Not tonight." As I watched him led away, his polished face giving way to genuine fear, I felt a hollow weight settle in my chest. Years of fatherhood, of hope that I could guide him, of endless chances, had culminated in this Jasper, my son, my responsibility, now a criminal by his own volition. I closed my eyes briefly, breathing deeply, letting the night air wash over me. The adrenaline ebbed, leaving clarity in its place. I had survived, protected myself, and through the meticulous work of the law, ensured that justice could prevail. But as the handcuffs clicked, and the officers escorted him into the squad car, I realized something I could not escape. My son was gone. The boy I had known, the man I had tried to save, was irreversibly replaced by someone capable of cold, calculated betrayal. And the world, indifferent as ever, moved on. He'd threatened me in my own home. I closed the financial records with decisive finality, each paper sliding into its place with a whisper of resolution. The family album followed, its weight substantial in my hands. These memories would remain, but the pattern they documented would end. The grandfather clock in the living room chimed 10 times, its deep notes resonating through the house. Outside, the last of the evening joggers had passed, leaving only the quiet rustle of wind through the oak trees. I finished the whiskey and locked the manila folder in my desk drawer. The key turned with a soft click that seemed to echo with finality. Whatever came next, whatever threats Jasper might make good on, I would not bend. He was 38 years old. If he was going to learn responsibility, it would have to be now in the hardest way possible. The broken photograph caught the dying firelight one last time before I turned off the lamp and headed upstairs to bed. 18 hours had passed since Jasper's explosive departure. 18 hours of restless sleep interrupted by memories of his cold smile and the sound of breaking glass. I arrived at Wells Tech Solutions at 9 sharp, hoping the familiar routine of profit margins and market analysis would cleanse my mind of family drama. The view from my corner office normally brought me peace. Lake Michigan stretching endlessly toward the horizon, the geometric precision of downtown Chicago's skyline. Today it felt like looking through prison bars. I adjusted the family photograph on my desk, intact, showing Mabel and Jasper during happier times at Navy Pier. The contrast with last night's destruction made my chest tighten. My secretary's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Wells, your son Jasper is online too." The words hung in the air like smoke. I stared at the blinking red light on my phone, hand frozen halfway to the receiver. 15 seconds passed. 20. The light continued its patient pulse, waiting for my decision. Finally, I set down my pen and straightened in my leather chair, preparing for another assault. "Hello, Jasper, Dad. I want to apologize for yesterday. I was wrong. The voice was completely different, soft, humble, stripped of venom. I gripped the phone tighter, searching for the trap hidden in those unexpected words. This is unexpected, Jasper. Violet reminded me how much you've done for me over the years. I let my fear control me, and I said terrible things. Will you come to dinner tonight, please? I found myself writing, dinner Jasper's 7 p.m. in my appointment calendar before my rational mind caught up. The pen felt heavy in my hand as I watched the words appear on the page. All right, what time? 7 o'clock. And Dad, a pause filled with what sounded like genuine emotion. I'm truly sorry. The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone as if it might explain what had just happened. My son, who 24 hours ago had threatened me in my own home, was now inviting me to dinner with apologies and humility. I leaned back in my chair, watching afternoon shadows creep across the financial reports scattered on my desk. Either Jasper had undergone a miraculous transformation overnight, or this was the most sophisticated manipulation he'd ever attempted. The afternoon stretched ahead like a question mark, and I had no idea what answer awaited me in Wicker Park. The drive home through Chicago's evening traffic gave me too much time to think. Radio stations blurred together as I searched for distraction, finally settling on classical music that matched my contemplative mood. By the time I reached Oak Park, doubt had crystallized into certainty that something was wrong with Jasper's sudden transformation. I stood before the mirror, adjusting my tie for the third time, watching my own uncertainty reflected in my eyes. The navy blue suit felt appropriate, respectful, not ostentatious. I checked my wallet methodically. Credit cards, cash, business cards. My phone showed full battery. In my study, I paused before the telephone, weighing my options. Mabel's voice echoed in my memory. Trust but verify. Hope for the best but prepare for the worst. I dialed Martin's number. Urban, everything all right? If I don't call you by midnight, check Jasper's apartment. 1247 North Winchester, Unit 3B. You got it. Be careful, Urban. The house secured. The security system armed. I drove to Wicker Park in my modest Buick, choosing simplicity over ostentation. The converted brownstone on North Winchester looked tired in the fading daylight, its brick facade weathered by Chicago winters. I parked across the street, noting the contrast between this neighborhood and my own. Jasper met me at the apartment door with an embrace lasting a beat too long, his grip surprisingly strong. Dad, thank you for coming. It means everything. His smile was perfect. Warm, apologetic without being servile. Violet's been cooking all afternoon, he said, leading me into the small living room. She's so excited to see you. Violet appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her smile bright but strained. The apartment revealed their financial reality, but everything was clean. Dinner progressed with Jasper performing his redemption with polished anecdotes and exaggerated concern, yet small details betrayed him. Poker chips visible in a drawer, empty wine bottles lined by the back door, Violet's trembling hands and constant phone checking. When she excused herself, a whispered exchange revealed a fear she couldn't speak aloud. I finished my wine and set down the glass with deliberate finality. Thank you both for a lovely evening. I should head home. Certainty settled in my chest like a stone. Something was very wrong here. The walk home through Oak Park's quiet streets should have been calming. Instead, I noticed the black sedan trailing me, maintaining the same distance for blocks. Heart racing, I ducked into an alley, hiding behind crates in a storage shed. The two men's coordinated voices revealed professionalism, not random crime. Jasper won't pay us for nothing. We need to find him, one said. The other, yeah, but if we can't find him, how's he going to know he was scared? It hit me like a physical blow. My son had hired these men to hunt me. Murder disguised as intimidation. I stayed frozen until the engines faded, finally emerging and rushing to a nearby 24-hour diner to call 911. Martin responded immediately, dispatching units and investigating. Within minutes, the black Camry was located and the two hired men, Tony Marchetti and Vince Rodriguez were in custody. Confessions, bank records, and text messages confirmed Jasper's plan to terrify me to death using knowledge of my heart condition. At the station, I sat in a quiet corner, letting the institutional calm wash over me as Martin and his team prepared for Jasper's arrest. Dawn filtered through the windows. By 8 a.m., Martin returned. Jasper's in custody, arrested at home without incident. Complete shock. He admitted everything. I requested to see him. In the interview room, he sat in orange jail coveralls, hands cuffed, looking smaller, broken. Dad, I was desperate. Those people were going to. You made your choice, I said, voice level, businesslike. I gave you everything, and you chose to try to kill me, using information I shared in confidence. You're no longer my son. Later that morning, back home with a police escort, I called my lawyer to begin changing my will. Jasper's name would be removed entirely, inheritance redirected to charitable organizations, and a trust fund for Violet. She had shown more courage in one text message than her husband in 38 years. In my study, surrounded by family photographs that would need updating, I reflected on Mabel's wisdom. She had warned me about enabling Jasper's destructive behavior. The broken family photo still sat on my desk, prismatic shards of glass catching the morning sunlight. I placed it carefully in the trash along with the last illusions I had been protecting. Justice would run its course. Wells Tech Solutions would continue under capable leadership. My wealth would benefit worthy causes, and for the first time in years, I could plan a future free from constant fear and manipulation. Sometimes cutting toxic people out of your life, even family, is the only way to find peace.